welcome back. I decided to go ahead and do the video that I'll probably release tomorrow. So, this one is a conversation, something that has been floating around my mind, is this really weird notion within humanity. Like, I mean, we are our own worst enemy in many ways, but like one of the things that bothers me is like when we're looking at a serious amount of drought on the West Coast, and people have brought up desalinization, which absolutely can be a result to this. Desalinization technology has come quite a long way, and it can be used to give a water supply to an entire area, like in a big way. When we would talk about in environmental science water not being considered a renewable source, what was being talked about was not how much water there is versus isn't, because the amount of water that's here on Earth is the same amount of water that's always been here. It just keeps being recycled back into the environment over and over again. The thing is how much water is drinkable to how much water is undrinkable is what was being referred to when we talk about water not being a renewable source. Desalinization is a pretty new technology. It's been around for maybe like a decade or so, but today it's at the point, like, we used to not be able to use it to supply water to an entire city or society. Well, now the technology is there. And so people on the West Coast, as we're facing all this drought, and yes, there's a lot of other legal things surrounding, like the farming industry puts a huge drain on the water supply on the West Coast, particularly almonds. Yeah, that's a thing, absolutely. But when it's posed, why don't we, put desalinization in? Essentially, desalinization would take water from being a non-renewable source to being a completely renewable source. Because now it's limitless. Now there is no such thing as undrinkable water. Or water that's undrinkable, there's no such thing as water that we can't make drinkable. So this would be a really good idea. This is what I find interesting, is when you talk to sort of the right wing, particularly the ethno-nationalists, like sort of white supremacist types. They're really worried about the human species in regards to white people specifically. I don't know why anyone's worried about the population of the human species right now, being that we're at 7 billion. The white supremacists are worried about one particular ethnicity. But if we are worrying, like if this is a general consensus that the survival of our species is important, that's the first question that we have to answer. Is the survival of the human species important? Yes or no? If it's not important to you, then yeah, I can see why this is irrelevant. But I think the general overall consensus is that the survival of the human species is pretty important. So when it's been proposed to do this desalinization thing, this would end any struggles that we would have for water, and for the entire world. Like, water no longer a problem. We can desalinate. The initial investment of desalinization, I think, is roughly around 100 or 400 million dollars, something like that. And after that, there's maybe some annual maintenance upkeep, but other than that, it's not terribly expensive. And it's something that would be very, very important to the humans, not just the human species, but I mean, like, it would be a game changer, huge game changer, in survivability, not just of our species, but all the other species that we look after and care for and keep alive. So we have this ability, and when it's posed, why do we do the desalinization thing? Well, the answer from the politicians or the people involved in politics and whatnot is we don't want to spend the money on it. Okay, that's a very strange response to me. What they're essentially saying is that, and I'm not saying this to criticize capitalism. This is a criticism of capitalism, but I'm not entirely against capitalism. I'm just saying this is a fault within it, and why mixed economies are a good idea, because no economic system is perfect. So I just want to make that clear. This may be a criticism of capitalism, but I'm not condemning capitalism outright. There are aspects of capitalism that are pretty functional, I'm not going to debate pro-capitalism, anti-capitalism. I just want to, this one thing, and it's not just about capitalism. What they're essentially saying is that capitalism and their ability to profitize is more important than the survival of the human species. Why is that? Like, this is a strange thing to me. Can you put a price tag on the survivability of the human species? Keep in mind, we're not talking about one group of people. We're not talking about a small group of people. We're not talking about people on a plane or something like that. Can we save the let's say there's a plane that's about to crash and kill like millions? It's like, well, can we save the people on the plane and the millions, or can we only save the millions and not the people on? That's not that kind of question. The thing that's standing in our way as far as the desalinization thing goes is not a matter of physics. It's not a matter of rules and laws of nature. It's not a probability thing. It's not a roll of the dice. It's something that we've made up. It exists in our mind. Money has value to us because we give it value. From a perspective like of the cosmos, of natural law of physics, money doesn't have any value. It has value because we need it for the things that we do with it. So when we talk about desalinization, and this is just one example, there's other examples of human beings doing this where it's like we sit there and say the survivability of the human species is really important. And then when it comes to having access or the availability to something that would be permissive to this, or that would be permissive to the survivability of the human species, the answer is no, due to some very arbitrary, socially created thing, something that we made up. That's what's standing in our way. So I just think that's such a bizarre thing to do. It's such a bizarre thing to say, to say to oneself, my ability to profitize off of something, or or my ideals, my way of life, my values are more important than the survival of the human species. I can't rationalize that. I think if the survivability of the human species is important to you, the initial cost of desalinization is irrelevant. Now, I've talked to somebody about this, and, like, taxes were brought up and how the tax system is abused by the government and all that, and it's like, it could be done through taxes. It could. Sometimes taxes are used appropriately. A lot of the times they're not, but sometimes they are. And so, right now, a lot of people are turning to very, very radical or political extremes because of a distrust in the government's ability to manage these things appropriately, and when people lose trust, it's because they've seen the government do things that are unprofessional, kind of power grabs, mismanagement, that kind of stuff. So it's understandable to be skeptical, but it's like, even if it was just a one-time donation, or however it's done, I think is irrelevant. Just get it done. Just do it. Just get it the fuck done. And the fact that we don't, I find it very curious. I almost want to blame theism for it, in the sense where it's just like, well, our consciousness exists forever, so, like, if we die, who cares? And I'm not sure that that's the kind of attitude that we should have if preserving the human species is actually important. And I mean, I suppose you could say, well, what the only thing that's important is, like, the people you love and care about now, family, friends, that kind of stuff. Well, let's say that you have somebody that, like a niece, nephew, child, grandkid, 5 years old today. They're going to be having to deal with this in the future when you're dead. So it's like, I think answering that question is, the survivability of the human species important to you or not? And realize that there are people that are being born now that have deep, meaningful value to you and probably related to you, or, like, that they're important, that they're part of your close niche. They'll still have to deal with these questions later on, after we're dead. So it can't be both, you can't say that you care about the survivability of the human species and then in the same breath say, well, I don't want to do this thing that would ensure the survival, be one step in the direction of ensuring the survivability of the human species. I find that to be intellectually inconsistent. I also find it to be rather bothersome. That people put these arbitrary things before human life itself. And this is what I mean, human beings are, we are our own worst enemy. We are perpetually doing things, standing in the way of doing things that will aid and help the survivability of our species. we continuously insist on playing on the darker side of humanity, things like anger and violence, insecurities, egotism, jealousy. But human beings also have a great capacity for empathy and sympathy, and we can also be extremely compassionate. And it's like, why don't we focus on the more positive side of humanity instead of the more negative side of humanity? I don't understand that. So the reason why, the countries across the world won't just completely dismantle all their nuclear weaponry is because, somebody might lie about it and keep them anyway, and there's all kinds of questions around there. It's like, well, do you trust this government? Do you trust that government? How do you know they're not going to lie to you? We need our nuclear arms because what if they fire it? And we need this sort of self-defense, and it's like, yeah, I hear you, but the question I'm asking is, why would anyone even be tempted to push the button in the first place? That's the question. One of the questions I've asked is, what is a king when they have no one to rule over? Let's say you do have somebody with like a button to just they destroy all humanity but themselves, and they're the only human being left. What's the point in that? You can't save the human species at that point. You'll be alone. What's the point of that? What is a kingdom without? What is a king without a kingdom to rule? It's pointless. It's oxymoronic. And I find the denying of the technology of desalinating water to be oxymoronic, especially if we are concerned about the continuation of the human species. And look for this stuff, because you won't just see it with this water example. It exists in other places too, where it's like the things holding us back are stuff that exists in our head. It's not that there's physics standing in our way or natural law standing in our way. It's stuff in our head, stuff we made up. Like values, I guess. Or a lot of it seems to be like a traditional thing, like this deep desire to want to hold on to nostalgia and not let old technologies, old ways of thinking die off and move forward into new ways. So I find that interesting. So like that's more important to you than the survival of the human species, is it? It's interesting. So that's something that I've been thinking about recently, is sort of these paradoxes, these oxymoronic claims that, like people are like, survivability, we have to survive. And then when it comes to actually doing something that would do that and eliminate some of the issues that we're facing, they're like, oh no, we can't do that. And it's like, well, why not? Well, because my religion, my dogma, my it's not ideals, it's my principles, my ability to make a profit is more and is really, really important to. It's almost like these people can't see the long term. I don't know. let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you've seen other examples of this, and let me know what you think on the question: is the survivability of the human race important to you or not? And where do we draw the line of what's acceptable to of what lengths we go to save the human, or to ensure the survivability of the human race, and what isn't acceptable? Like, is there a line that you draw in the sand where it's just like, I think that the survivability of the human race is important until you get to X, then it's no longer important. Like, no, we can't. Like, it's not more important than X, but it is more important than Y. So I'd be curious on individuals' thoughts on that. So, yeah, so that's something I've been thinking about. Again, I'm playing Lords of the New Church. Maybe I'll do the same thing. I'll look for some links to some songs on YouTube and leave them in the description. But with that, I'm out.